Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It has just gone 14 after 9 o'clock. Welcome back. This is News and Views with me, Shuli, on Salam Media. We're now going to be talking with public policy analyst Ebrahim Khali lHassen about this is absolutely ridiculous, is all I can say. The issue around South African Airways having been sold for 51 rands. I hope I'm not misreading that. In the introduction this morning to the show, I did indicate that maybe it should be reading 51 million rands or 51 billion rands. But I'm looking at it absolutely in black and white, and it says SAA was sold for 51 rands. And wait for this, taxpayers could still pay some of its debt. Absolutely outrageous. Let's hear what Ebrahim Khali lHassen makes of this ridiculous situation or outrageous situation. Ebrahim Khali lHassen, Salaam alaikum, welcome to the program.
Oh, walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me.
Lovely to have you on the show. I didn't misread, did I? It is in fact 51 rands.
Yes. It's a little more complicated than that because the information that's been put out into the public says that the company Takatso that's buying the 51% share would make 3 billion rand of operating capital immediately available. So it's not just the 51 rand, but that's the value of the transaction for the share.
So they've got to go out and they've got to raise funds by obviously selling off shares. Am I understanding you correctly?
So what Takatso will do is that they will go out and they will finance the deal. That might mean that they might go to a bank and raise a loan. Both of the companies involved in Takatso both have assets as well, but they will raise the 3 billion. That's the agreement with government, and that would be over the next 2 years. According to the information that's been released.
Ebrahim, do you personally and honestly believe that they will be able to, the new owners, Takatso Consortium, would be able to turn the airline around? If they are business savvy, is it doable? And in the long term, could it be a profitable business?
Yes, certainly. I mean, SAA has been through a decade, almost 2 decades of real turmoil. But there's always been a business case for a airline, particularly a regional airline, an airline focused in Africa, that could be profitable, provided one had the correct management and one chose the correct routes, and there was proper management of the entire process of flying people and of managing the business. So yes, I mean SAA could be profitable. The people involved in Takatso are seasoned in the aviation industry. So they, for instance, own Lyft as one of the companies, and clearly sees this as an opportunity to make money going forward over sort of the next 5 to 10 years.
All right. So I kind of started the interview on a negative angle, talking about it being sold for 51 rands, wondering who's going to be pocketing lots of money. But from what you're telling me, they really are the saviors, so to speak, as far as SAA is concerned. And if they manage it, you're also indicated that they do have experience in the airline industry, that they could revive SAA, and lots of people that have been out of jobs for a very long time could then be gainfully employed as well, plus turn a profit in possibly 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah. So that's essentially the story that the Department of Public Enterprises wants to say. So they released a communication a couple of days ago indicating, it's about reviving the broader industry, making sure they get the skilled development processes in place, etc. I mean, on the other side, there are some deep questions about this deal that government and broadly in South Africa we're going to need to unpack. The most important thing is that we don't have all the information on the table. for instance, a few weeks back, the National Treasury went to Parliament and indicated that they were not involved in the process of structuring this deal. So it's not just like all smooth sailing and it's a good deal. The deep questions that are there. The one question is, this is probably going to be the first of many privatizations. So regardless of what one thinks about privatization, etc., the reality is that there are processes unfolding in South Africa. And we need to figure out as a society how we open the process of negotiating these deals to more public scrutiny. But we certainly don't want to have another round of bad deals and sort of a continuation of the process of state capture going forward. It's really important that we get this deal correct, and that what journalists and other people are doing, trying to open this deal to great levels of public scrutiny, is absolutely important.
Okay, let me take you back to the issue around National Treasury. What we're hearing them saying is that the terms may result in the state providing funds in excess of its shareholding. What does that then say to us? They also go on to say, Enoch Godongwana, that the National Treasury didn't participate in the sale process and the substance of the letter stands. The department then further declined to comment further. Should they not have been involved to truly understand what exactly was going down, what it's going to cost the taxpayer, how long are they going to take to turn this around, and will promises be kept, and that monies don't go into back pockets of the already corrupt officials, government officials?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's something that doesn't fit right here. I mean, ultimately, this should be a cabinet decision, which should see Minister Gordhan and Minister Godongwana on the same page. The fact that they're not on the same page is really worrying, for a whole range of reasons that you just outlined. I mean, what are exactly the terms of the deal? What is the exposure of the fiscal? So yeah, I mean, it raises deep concern. The important bit here, or what the minister is arguing and Department of Public Enterprise is arguing, is that they've at least saved the business and they managed to retain jobs. So that's what they're arguing. So my personal view is that I would have argued even sort of 10, 15 years ago that SA probably needed to privatize. It's basically a rich person's service. But the way we're going about doing it now is likely to create issues going forward. And that is something that we don't need as a country at this particular moment.
What are those issues that you're alluding to? And then also we need to understand who is Takatso. That would give us a clearer understanding of whether we are headed in the right direction.
Sure. So I mean, I think the big issues for me is the issue around the transparency of the deal that's being undertaken. So what exactly is the liability of government going forward? Have they ring-fenced certain liabilities within SAA? We don't know that. Certainly from the information that are coming out, it seems that what has happened is that certain parts of the liabilities within SAA have been ring-fenced, and government would be responsible for that. So does that mean within the next sort of year, 2 years, that government would be doing another sort of bailout, which would kind of defeat the purpose of selling 51% off in SAA? The other issue is around the broader role of the aviation industry. So beginning to get an aviation industry that works in South Africa, that opens up opportunities, etc. And yeah, I think the government has done maybe a bit better because they have included what they call a golden share. So there are certain issues that they would have kind of like a casting vote over. So even though they have 49% of shares, so for instance, the Takatso can't sell the airline without government approval. It has to work within a mandate of building the aviation industry, etc. So the second issue, the third issue is what does this mean for broader restructuring of state-owned enterprises? We need to have a clear process, a way that governs the way ministers work during this process. They can't be going out like a private business and just kind of making the rules up as they go along. There needs to be a process that's agreed to in cabinet around how these processes will undertake. So, for an example, I mean, in the next 6 months, I mean, we're going to see a big restructuring of the electricity industry. What does that mean? I mean, are we going to be introducing private partnerships in Eskom? There's an agreement around allowing private usage of railroads. Under what conditions do that happen? So it's really important that we get the not just governance type of issues, but the broader sort of process. We need the rules of the game in place before we actually undertake this big transaction.
Now, we started off this conversation talking about privatization, and I kind of wondered, with all of the corruption we've seen over the past couple of years that has literally brought South Africa to its knees, uh, is privatization the way for us to go, for South Africa to be going? Would we have people with years and years of experience and obviously assets and connections abroad as well to bring that expertise in to lift South Africa up onto its feet? Is that the route to go? Or does privatization then suggest perhaps state capture? Your thoughts?
So, I mean, it's a really difficult question to answer. I would say certainly in the case of SAA, for me, it's a private service for rich people. I have no problem with that being privatized. However, when one comes to things like even rail, which is important for businesses in South Africa, or electricity, those are more sort of services that are more publicly orientated, and there we need to be really careful about how we restructure these entities. So, for instance, I mean, one argument in terms of Eskom is that we simply need to bring in international expertise, a private company to run Eskom better. However, when one looks at the results of privatization of electricity across the world, it's very, very mixed. So again, the question is that if you choose to bring in a private partner, it's really about getting the frameworks in place and the conditions in place to make that work for you. So I think we long past the view, that privatization is good or bad and state ownership is good. I mean, that was kind of the debate from the 1990s. We long past that. I mean, we had very struggling uh, uh, state-owned enterprises. So I mean, Eskom funds are absolutely critical to the economy, and we're going to need to have some sort of private investment or some sort of turnaround strategy. The question is, can we do it in a way that continues to reflect the public interest rather than narrow interests of people within those companies? And already, I mean, we shouldn't pretend that the current ways that funds that the Eskom operates basically supports larger players in the economy at the expense of smaller players. And that's something that we need to challenge if we're going to once we restructure these entities.
Okay, we were talking SAA, the bailout of SAA by Takatso. Do we know who they are? And then you've touched on Eskom, and I'd like to explore that area a little more if you don't mind. But let's just go back to Takatso. Do we know who the people are, who all of the partners are in that?
Yeah, sure. We do know. I mean, it's a two-part consortium. The one is called the Harriet Group, and the other one is the owner of Lyft. I mean, these companies are known. We know who they are.
With a
The
good
main
track record, Ebrahim, with a good track record.
yes. I mean, the main sort of personality is Gideon Nebot, who has a long experience within the aviation industry and is respected within the industry.
Okay, and we talk about viable business solutions. We talk about profitability, etc. Obviously, when you have these entities being privatized, no one else is going to come in and bail them out, your SAAs and Escoms, etc. If they are unable to make money out of it, and that's what business is all about, is it not? That you want to see a profitable bottom line. And we don't have any problem with that. As long as they're able to turn the business around, make it very, very productive, be able to supply electricity or whatever commodity it is that they are supplying reasonably and affordably to the masses. Would you agree with that?
No, sure. I mean, I think balancing the profitability of the company with the broader interests of society is an absolutely critical thing, particularly when entities like SAA get privatized. It's absolutely critical that we're able to balance it. In the case of SAA, I mean, what's important to know that even though it's basically, I describe it as a rich person's service, what SAA has done traditionally within the South African economy is that it has ensured that there's flights to kind of remote or less serviced kind of routes. But secondly, it's run a very important human resource development strategy in South Africa. So, I mean, the number of black pilots that we see in South Africa, the number of female pilots that we see in South Africa, black and female technicians, etc., a lot of it comes through from the investments that SAA has made. And through privatizing, one needs to ensure that the process of human resource development within our country continues. And I think government has tried to stipulate that. But that would be kind of one of the key markers for me going forward, is whether this transaction results just in them, running a profitable airline, or whether we're able to rebuild the human resource capacities within the aviation industry.
Right. Undoubtedly, we hope and pray that that is obviously part of the deal. It should be a non-negotiable. Let's go to Eskom then. And just before I get to Eskom, how soon is TATA taking over full time, and how soon do you believe we'll start seeing results?
Like I said, we need more information. And yeah, according to the government release, it's very patchy amounts of information. I'd actually like to see the contract being released. So it's a bit of a difficult question to answer. But from my understanding, is that it's pretty soon. And that probably, I suppose, within the next 2 years, they've committed to put in 3 billion rand worth of operating capital. So that would be a clear marker we can probably assess within 2 years whether that is actually happening.
So we need a similar type of intervention with Eskom. What we are hearing, which you must have picked up as well, is there's large-scale sabotage throughout the organization. What do you make of it? Do you believe that it is almost a third force in play there to deliberately cripple Eskom in the country? We know the infighting not only in the ANC but all other political parties. What exactly is playing out at Eskom?
That's a really difficult question. My sense is that there's clearly a range of issues that are going on that cannot be explained just by normal maintenance type issues. The CEO has been quite upfront, which I find quite interesting, around claims around sabotage in a range of places. As well as, besides the sabotage, like physical sabotage of infrastructure, there's also been 1 billion rand worth of parts that have just simply vanished.
The diesel that has been stolen over time.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
The diesel that has been stolen over time.
Yes, absolutely. So, Eskom has a range of issues, and my solution to, or the way I think we need to start thinking about Eskom is that it's no use government asking Eskom to keep the lights on 100% of the time, and then when the stations fail, we kind of go into load shedding. I think what we need is a process of, like, almost saying, we know that Eskom's not working, so what we're going to have is planned load shedding for like the next 4 to 5 years, and in that period, what we're going to do is we're going to sort out the infrastructure issues that are there, and we're going to try and shift towards renewable energy. So it's a more difficult sort of position to take, to say that the thing is not working. And part of sorting it out would begin to deal with the criminal syndicates within Eskom. I have no doubt that they're there. The CEO has been quite upfront about it. It's a question in South Africa is that even if we have information in the public domain, do people function with impunity? The same issue with the state capture reports, etc. You need to see you need to see arrests and you need to see the justice taking its course. That's absolutely critical. But the Eskom restructuring is a hell of a lot more complicated. So planned in the next few months will be where they separate out, or where they're planning to separate out Eskom into three companies. So a company for generation of electricity, a company for transmission of electricity, and a company for the distribution of electricity. So that's a big restructuring. It's probably going to be the biggest restructuring of a state-owned enterprise we've seen in South Africa since democracy. And that's going to happen if all goes according to plan in terms of government within the next sort of 6 months. They're planning to introduce the legislation. Whether that means in terms of just what we're discussing in terms of SAA, further privatization down the line, I'm not sure, because you could have these three companies which are fully state-owned just separated out because they become more manageable in terms of operations.
Okay, there's also, and you kind of wonder about Doratas' future as well. It could, come to a point where the man has just had enough and throws in the towel. Undoubtedly, there is a price on his head as well by these saboteurs, undoubtedly. But be that as it may, I'm kind of wondering also, with all of this, you're talking about a long-term plan, Eskom being broken up into 3 different entities, etc. That has been on the table for a while now. But, in between all of that mix, we've also heard about the Turkish power ship that is supposed to be docked at our ports to supply electricity. There are certain people that are up in arms about it, and obviously there has been finger pointing as well that it's going to end up costing the taxpayer, because to pay this off is going to be a 20-year payoff period, which doesn't make sense according to someone I spoke to a little while ago. Do you know anything more about it? Or is South Africa still going ahead with this plan? Because there has been an outcry against it. Is there a need? Because it's not cost effective at all.
No, here again, it's just, the process is currently stopped by the courts. But I think the bigger issue is, and this is why I'm emphasizing the long-term sort of process around this here, is that you need a sequencing of reforms that are clear to the public, that are clear to investors, etc., around what's going to happen within the electricity sector. So government is almost moving on 2 different types of issues. The classical one is the kind of the public debate between the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Mineral Resources. Minister of Mineral Resources says we need clean coal technology. Minister of Environment says we need renewable energy. Now, these are issues that shouldn't be played out at that level. Cabinet needs to sit around and basically do the job that we've appointed them to do, which is to make a decision within the country around an electricity plan. Another sort of contradiction is that the president goes out and makes a major announcement around allowing higher levels of private generation of electricity, and then 2 weeks later, the Minister of Mineral Resources will be punting this scheme with to generate electricity for the boat. So, it's confusion, and it's really something that needs to be settled quite quickly. There's no short-term fixes around electricity, and I think South Africa needs to get to this point quickly. My view, which is an extremely unpopular view, is that the cabinet should be given a directive to Eskom that it has the mandate to introduce load shedding that's more predictable. So in other words, it would mean that if you stay in Region A, your electricity will be out every Wednesday, and the deal that we're having is that Eskom would then sort out the maintenance. They would then begin to have space to actually sort out the issues that you've raised around criminality, with energy procurement, etc. And that's the only way we're going to realistically fix Eskom going forward. Pretending that we have a system that can provide 100% electricity 100% of the time is basically going to erode what is already a crippling infrastructure.
Well, all I can say is obviously, Ibrahim, government is not listening to the voices of the people and informed voices like yourself. I often wonder all the different analysts that we talk to here on the show, and they make perfectly good sense. And how come they're talking to us and to other citizens of the country? But how come, and we understand what they're saying, and we understand that it's achievable, it's doable, and yet government is not listening to experts like yourself. But thank you indeed for your time. Let's hope and pray someone somewhere is listening and common sense prevails. Ebrahim Khali Hassan, public policy analyst, talking to us about SAA and Eskom. Till the next time, as always, shukran and salaam alaikum to you.
Alaikum salam.
9:39 exactly, news and views on Salam Media. We'll be talking in a minute or two to Abdul Alim Hamza, head of fundraising at Islamic Relief, and then we'll be talking about Hajj classes, and then it will bring us to wrap up time. So stay with us for the next 20 minutes at least.